Hi, this is Aaron Wilson. I'm at the NFL Scouting Combine, and the NFL has now set the salary cap spending limit at $279.2 million, up nearly $24 million, biggest rise in NFL history, highest salary cap in NFL history. And where this comes into play for the Texans, a team that is, close to the salary cap at $8.788 million projected, they still have some financial flexibility and they can create even more. Nick Caserio's optimism, not unfounded. He has the ability to restructure these contracts, and if he thinks there's an opportunity, the Texans can be high bidders and they can spend in free agency. Doesn't mean necessarily they should, and it was interesting to hear him allude to the Philadelphia Eagles, bring up the example of linebacker Zach Bond, who had an outstanding season under a one-year, prove-it $3.5 million deal. All general managers love to have a bargain like a Zach Bond, a little bit reminiscent of how Blake Cashman had a breakout season for the Texans and then cashed in with his hometown Minnesota Vikings. So the Texans, I think, will be spenders, just not the biggest spenders, in free agency. You look at some of the opportunities for restructures. There's Danielle Hunter, one of the highest cap figures on the team, $23.7 million. They can get that number down with a simple restructure, and he would like a raise possibly to extend that deal. We'll see if that happens, but converting all that, a lot of the salary into a signing bonus, having with a better minimum salary, is an attractive option for all these players. And the Texans contractually, they have the mechanism to do that anytime. It's not really a negotiation. It's something that they have the ability to do. You look at other contracts, they could get Laramie Tunsil's cap figure down significantly. It could save about $10 million with a restructure, again, of Laramie Tunsil. Nico Collins' contract, very ripe for another restructure. It's a high base salary, and you can get that number down. So I look at where the Texans are financially, and I still think they have opportunities. A couple things I'm hearing. They have interest in bringing back Mario Edwards Jr., but it could be expensive for him to try to bring him back. I think he's going to have a good market. I think it could be somewhere in the $7 million range as the high point. Derek Barnett, another player in the rotation, they'd love to have back. I think he's going to have a decent market too. So there's going to be some guys that are going to lose, and that's the reality. Don't know if they're going to make an offer or a big offer for Foley Fatukasi. Injuries a factor there on the defensive line. Still formulating their plan on the offensive line, whether they're going to bring back Titus Howard at his current number or try to restructure his contract, possibly reduce his contract. We'll see what happens with Titus Howard. Shaq Mason is a candidate for release, but remember, he has a long-standing relationship with Cole Popovich from their time together with the New England Patriots. I could see them possibly trying to, stick with Shaq. I don't think it's necessarily a conclusion yet on Shaq Mason's time with the Texans. So we're going to keep monitoring that and see when there's action, actually, on Shaq Mason. So for right now, the Texans, I expect to head into free agency possibly with over $20 million if they do a couple of these restructures. Maybe they even get to $30 million, and that would give them plenty of space for signing their draft picks and keeping some of their own free agents and bidding on others, and then having an undrafted free agent class, and of course having an emergency fund for players that go on injured reserve. So every year you need to have financial reserves. So a lot of this talk is about money, and it's necessary. You have to have that cap space to be able to operate. And Nick Caserio has a proven track record of being able to move money around. Interesting talking to him about fiscal responsibility, and he brought this up unprompted. If you push the credit card bill, meaning you constantly are doing restructures, you just do that every year to create the space. Eventually that bill does become due, and you can be in salary cap hell, many call it, where you're way over the cap, and you just have to cut guys to get in compliance. And that's what you don't want to have. It's a lot of salary cap casualties. Biggest thing is to draft well, which they've done, develop those players, and be a competitive team. As Nick said, they got their ass kicked twice last year by the Minnesota Vikings and the Baltimore Ravens. Embarrassing losses. Other than that, they were in these games. They have a chance to be competitive. I don't know if anybody's going to think of them like a Super Bowl contender, like last year when there was a lot of hype with them adding Danielle Hunter and Joe Mixon, Azeez Al-Shaair, and others. This time, I think it's going to be about improvement within the roster. Are there higher levels they can get to with C.J. Stroud? Obviously, yes. Can Will Anderson Jr. play even better? Can they continue to get stellar corner play from Derek Stingley Jr.? I believe so. I think that Azeez Al-Shaair could have a better second season for the Texans. Obviously, some of that was contributed to by his suspension for the Trevor Lawrence hit late in the year. Looking at the Texans, they weren't healthy at linebacker with, Azeez missing some time with a knee injury and Christian Harris missing so much time with the calf injury. That really affected his season. I look at their opportunity to get better there. I think that's another area where there can be improvement within the roster. They've been looking at a lot of the safeties here in the draft class, and I think that they will try to add a safety one way or another to go with Kalen Bullock. They say that Jimmy Ward is making a sound recovery from his foot surgery. He broke his foot, and he's on the mend, and they just need to get more games out of him. He was limited to 10 games last season. He's been way too prone to injuries. They've already extended the deal. There's a lot of guaranteed money there. I see him being a part of the team one way or another. I would be a little surprised if they moved on from Jimmy Ward. Looking around the roster and some other things they can do, they're going to eventually want to look at, with the offensive line configuration, what's the best five they can get out there? Can they add anyone to go with that five? And it's a big point of emphasis for the Texans. Haven't heard about anything that they're really hot and heavy for just yet as far as an outside player, but I think that they will try to add at least one offensive lineman via free agency and then draft one. It's a good draft for that, to add a player like a Tyler Booker or several other of the top offensive linemen. It'll be available in the first couple of rounds. So look for the Texans to probably double dip on the offensive line. I think it's a good idea. If they can acquire more picks, move back, obviously that would be a great scenario for the Texans to still get a really coveted player there, possibly further back from 25. We're going to talk to the wide receivers on Friday, so interested to hear from those guys. I'm sure the Texans will have a lot of official meetings and informal meetings as well with the wide receiver class. It includes Emeka Egbuka and Matthew Golden and Luther Burden, Isaiah Bond, and just to name a few. Sam Brown is another player that I think is going to do pretty well in testing and be a target for teams, probably third round for Sam Brown, former University of Houston player, finished up at the University of Miami. So, with the Texans and everything they're doing, a lot of meetings. They meet with their own free agents, so a lot of those meetings are going to happen here at the Combine, already started that, and even with players currently under contract. So, those discussions, obviously Derek Stingley Jr. extension, that's further on in the offseason. I would expect Jalen Petrie to be a candidate, again, for an extension. So look at Petrie possibly, Stingley, and them to spend some of their money on their own players, which is a good way to fortify your roster and continue to have year after year after year of contending teams. So you got to draft well, you got to develop, you got to keep players, you got to maintain your roster, and you'll have guys that want to be here. I thought the NFL Players Association poll was interesting, the report card. Yes, the sauna's coming, that's on its way, and I think that they are conducive to learning from things and listening to the players. I think the organization's in a healthy spot, much different than it was during the end of the Bill O'Brien era, and there's a better vibe at NRG Stadium. I've had people ask me about the stadium issue. Don't sense that there's any real action there at this time as far as anything happening with any votes or a bond, public referendum to try to get public money, and I don't expect them. I've had people ask me, does this mean they're leaving, they're going to relocate? I don't expect that. I expect them to be at NRG Stadium for the really foreseeable future, and they're renegotiating the lease, and we'll see how that finishes out in terms of the Texans and Harris County, the rodeo, and everything that will go into that. But yeah, no real news there at this time with that other than the desire, like every team when their stadium is couple decades old, to either refurbish it, make some improvements. There will be some improvements with video boards, some other things with the stadium to maintain the concrete and everything else that surrounds the bones of the stadium. So we'll see what happens with NRG Stadium, but that's something we'll be tracking as things develop right now, just since it's more of a trial balloon, putting it out there, a desire to try to work on the stadium issue, but just not a hot button issue probably for the city and local politicians, and it has been somewhat unpopular on social media, the idea of helping to pay for a stadium when they're still paying for the stadium, about $1 billion left from when they initially built NRG Stadium, when Bob McNair is the founder and original owner of the Texans. Now it's still in the family with the McNairs. So you look at, moving on from back to football, from the stadium talk, I think that the Texans, they'll be in a good position. They'll be able to do some competitive things, just maybe not the big bonanza and spending spree that they went on last year during free agency, but they've gotten good news as far as the carryover from the salary cap and from the increase to $279.2 million. That's important because it's all about budgets. It's all about what price you put on the player, and then the production you get for your dollar, your hard-earned dollar. And the Texans have been pretty good, I would say, at free agency this past year. Didn't have a lot of guys that didn't pan out. They had some contracts that didn't go so great. They paid a lot of money for Dalton Schultz. Didn't have a great season from Dalton. It's all guaranteed he'll be back. So they hope to get more production out of Dalton. I think they could see them going younger at tight end this year. I think that they'll look at the tight end position. They met with the Michigan tight end. They met with a lot of the tight ends. They are, the Texas tight end. They are looking at tight ends here at the NFL Scouting Combine. As for me, I have one more day here. I fly back to Houston Friday night. We'll attend some more interviews with players that I did today. Big crowd for Travis Hunter. Says he's going to try to play corner and wide receiver in the NFL. He can do it. Just a matter of how they utilize him. Does he play mostly corner? That's what I would do with him. Does he play some wide receiver? They have a package of plays for him. What is the vision for those teams for Travis Hunter? And we'll see him. Perhaps we'll even see him in the division. Maybe he would be the Tennessee Titans' top overall pick. Maybe it'll be Abdul Carter. So Abdul Carter got some decent news. No surgery needed for Abdul, so he'll be able to work out at the Nittany Lions Pro Day on campus in State College, Pennsylvania. So, lots of medical updates. Nothing really super controversial from the Combine, other than the media little feistiness between Jordan Schultz and Ian Rappaport. I wasn't around for that. Heard a lot of things about it. Don't have a ton of opinions other than nobody wants to watch a media brawl. That's not a fun fight to watch. People would rather watch the UFC, the MMA, or watch some football. But it's definitely been the talk of the Combine here in the media center and in the bars and restaurants of downtown Indianapolis. So kind of funny. And it's a Starbucks I go to a lot, and I've never had one bad encounter at that Starbucks. I see my friends from all over the NFL, no beefs whatsoever. No, I think a lot of good people around the league, and look forward to when I come here each year, reuniting with them, talking with those guys, and just being able to get to know people. And sometimes I talk to people a lot on the phone all year, and it's a chance for me to see people in person, renew a lot of friendships and relationships that I have from covering the league for the past couple of decades. So it's a lot of fun for me to be here. It's also a lot of work, but it's a privilege to be here and to get a chance to talk with you guys about what's going on with your favorite football team, the Texans, and around the league. I think that going forward, what we'll see next week is probably some deals, and Texans trying to extend some of their own guys, maintain some of their roster before guys hit free agency, and then we'll see some guys hit free agency. I think Stephon Diggs will explore free agency. I think that's the plan, is for him to go out and see what his market is. I'm sure the Texans will stay in touch with him, but the vibe I get is if they lose Stephon Diggs, they're not overly concerned about that they would replace him with someone else and go forward. So if you're dead set on Stephon Diggs, you could wind up being disappointed because it's not really any lock that Stephon Diggs comes back and that he doesn't find a better deal from someone else, someone perhaps willing to spend a lot on wide receiver. The Patriots come to mind. I think that they're a team that's going to be good. There's some good free agents out there, some good values out there, including a defensive tackle like the Chargers' Puur Ford, former University of Texas standout. He's someone to keep an eye on. I think he will have a decent market in free agency. Hearing good things about Puur Ford and the enthusiasm for him around the NFL. Very solid, shorter, but powerful run-stopping defensive tackle. So lots of defensive tackles in this draft. Texans can do this any way they want. They could look at that position with, if they lose a couple guys, they can fill those gaps, I think, in free agency and or the draft. So opportunity in the defensive line, definitely improve. They don't want to take a step back. I know they've added Frank Okam. They've got Rob Wright back to coach those guys. And it's an elite unit, especially at defensive end with Hunter and Anderson. So they want to keep that rolling. Overall, the Texans, in my opinion, they're a team that I haven't seen them take any step back as far as being the best in the AFC South, but they still have got some room. They're going to have a good offseason, and this is the start of it, to be able to be a true Super Bowl contender. I think the hype last year was a bit overblown. People expected too much from that team, and ultimately they didn't live up to those expectations. They had a good year, but not a great year, and the offense held them back all year round. But Nick Caley, a lot of enthusiasm about Nick, hearing a ton of good things about him and his coaching acumen and what he's all about. So we're going to see him put in his spin on some of the things he's learned with the Rams with Sean McVay, the Patriots with Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick, and his whole background at John Carroll University. A lot of John Carroll University guys with the Texans. DJ Devick, Pro Personnel Director, Nick Caserio, their General Manager, Cole Popovich, worked with those guys. So a lot of background with these guys from JCU. Jerry Shoplinski, also a JCU football player, and Nick Caley, a former student assistant for John Carroll University. So a lot of ties there with JCU. They're very proud at that Division III private liberal arts school of what those guys have done in the NFL, and rightfully so. I'm going to wrap it up. I feel like talked to you guys enough today, giving you kind of my take on things and where things stand. Biggest headline, the salary cap, $279.2 million. Texans, just under $9 million available, the projection, and look for them to have more. But there are a ton of teams with a lot of salary cap space, and now with this cap going up, we have even more cap space, and it could be some bidding wars that the Texans just aren't financially equipped to compete in. So I would just say, don't have the highest expectations for fans, just trying to kind of prepare you for it. This will not be like last year's offseason. Reporting from the NFL Scouting Combine here at the Indiana Convention Center, I'm Aaron Wilson. Look forward to our next conversation.